Good morning! Unless it's not. Don't you just love mirrors?
I know I do.
I mean, they're great at all sorts of things, like checking your hair, brushing your teeth, calling yourself names, and even creating alternate dimensions with self-aware versions of ourselves that are evil and trying to escape into our world.
How about now? Definitely not.
And as much as I would love to run off on a tangent and shower you with knowledge of all sorts of mirror-related games, I only know one. Yep, I made this entire elaborate opening just so that I could talk about one Kirby game.
In the unlikely scenario you thought mirrors might be normal, Kirby is here to remind you, they're amazing. And while there is a new Kirby game that just came out that I'm sure loads of people would love for me to talk about,
I'm slow.
I mean, how do you expect me to talk about the new game Forgotten Land? It says it all right in the title, I forgot. But Kirby has been kicking around for a long time, even before he got the fighter power-up. Kirby is one of those franchises that quickly got left to the portable scene. I guess his raw, unlimited power would be too much if it were allowed on consoles, and also his games were simple enough that there was no need for better hardware. But man, I would have killed for a console Kirby game back then. Be careful what you wish for.
So of course, the pink puffball and I go way back. I seem to be pretty good at talking about older video games recently, or maybe just good at avoiding the relevant ones. I'm at the right age of blinded by nostalgia, so that means Kirby was always better before, even if the newest game is one of my favorites. Oh well. But another part of me that I've been trying to suppress for a really long time tends to like the games that are a little bit less popular. So even though Kirby did just get a new game, and a lot of people seem to really like it, I think the true Forgotten Land of the Kirby franchise is the Game Boy Advance era of video games. You know, both of them.
Kirby got his start back in the days when games were barely games, or at the very least, the pictures were barely pictures. Mostly releasing games for the Game Boy, the Warrior from the Stars did manage a few early console titles, but somehow my childhood home skipped all of the major consoles he had a title on, or at least the games. We never had an NES to play Kirby's Adventure, we never bought Superstar for no reason at all, and I actually don't know what happened to our old N64, and I'm too afraid to ask.
I'm assuming it was Kirby getting revenge.
But I was a child at the perfect time for my parents to get me a Game Boy, and then call everything they bought me from then on a Game Boy. I was a little too young for the original Game Boy craze, just starting to get into gaming around the time the GBA became bigger. And while one of the titles on GBA was just a remake of Kirby's Adventure, the other was a brand new standalone adventure meant to be enjoyed with up to 4 people.
Why?
Yeah, Nintendo was always in the lead with questionable decisions. You had a console perfectly capable of connecting 4 controllers to it, but you had to go and use link cables instead. To be fair, the game wouldn't have worked the same on console. While Kirby and the Amazing Mirror was a 4-player game, it was also a 4-player game where everyone had their own screen real estate.
Maybe that's what was so amazing about this mirror.
This game doesn't get talked about nearly as much as I feel like it should. I mean, back on the GBA, having a 4-player Kirby experience would be awesome. Everyone controlled Kirby instead of helpers, and it was a fully open world. I like to consider it a kind of Kirby Metroidvania, although I know that's not quite accurate. But if they decided to use it as a template to make a Kirby Metroidvania, oh man, that would be awesome. But then I would have had to talk about this game in Metroidmania in December.
It's the rules.
So the game is pretty average by most Kirby standards. You run around levels using powers from Kirby's enemies to beat up more bad guys. The Kirby gameplay is still at its core really fun, with the wide selection of powers making it a bit more interesting, including my own personal favorite, Missile.
'Cause I'm a torpedo.
But this time the levels are laid out a little bit different. Instead of choosing a level and beating it, the entire map is available to you from the get-go, provided you can find the right paths to reach where you want to go. The game is spread out between 9 worlds, 8 of which have a boss and a fragment of the titular Amazing Mirror, which is the ultimate goal of the game. Collect all the shards and hop into the mirror to fight the final boss. Pretty standard.
Wait a second. Does that mean... Yep.
But this exploration is very unique to this franchise. You have an overall map and fill it out by visiting rooms or by collecting treasure chests containing maps.
Go figure.
And certain worlds connect to each other. Certain areas provide shortcuts back to the hub, and eventually you have access to more and more power-ups from those hub portals. So basically, you just explore until you get where you're going. Unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. See, along many routes are one-way doors, especially one-way doors leading to special minigames that force you back to the hub. So it's very common to be heading in a certain direction, misread the map, and end up in the wrong place. It's probably not the worst thing, especially if you're smarter than me, but it happened multiple times, and as much as I enjoy the game, playing through the same sections over and over while trying to find the right path can be really frustrating.
Boy, exploration sure would be easier if there were 4 of me.
4 of you, you say? Well, have I got a treat for you. As part of the mirror being shattered, Kirby was also shattered into 4 Kirbys. Something about Game Boy games and protagonists being split into 4, I guess. That means that this game is fully playable with up to 4 people or 3 barely functioning AI. Yeah, this game does feel like it was made for more people, with the exploration being a bit repetitive. You could theoretically send someone else next time. Or, if everyone goes different ways, someone is bound to run into something. If you don't have 4 real human beings to play with, the AI will control the remaining Kirbys and just kind of explore randomly. You can call them with your cell phone, and they do heal you, but aside from that, yeah, not very helpful. But even just playing with a single friend back in the day was fun, because it was 2 people playing the same Kirby. I remember linking up with my sister all the time for this, because something about just cooperating without even needing to be together in-game was really exciting.
My sister wasn't the best, so being able to play co-op without getting held back was pretty fun. She was 5.
So the co-op definitely helps the game feel more well-crafted, but honestly, even just playing alone was fun enough. The selection of powers is nice, although this is back when a lot of abilities only had one function. But Smash exists. And while I absolutely love this game, looking back at it mostly just makes me want a modern version of it. Spruced up level designs, fancier maps, and of course online multiplayer would make this into a fantastic experience. Of course, Kirby is 3D now, so I think the next big thing is likely to be more in line with an open-world platformer than a Metroidvania, but I can always dream. Unfortunately, today it is not at all worth playing this game on original hardware, especially if you were looking to play with friends. But unfortunately, it doesn't even seem easy to set up with emulation, and there's legal issues there anyway.
What? You don't own a copy of Kirby and the Amazing Mirror for PC? No, this isn't an emulator, it's, Steam.
And lastly, you have the story, which is very well thought out. Like always, there's very little story here. Maybe more than other Kirby games, and most of it is just done with visuals, since everyone in this franchise is a mute. But it basically boils down to, bad guy is bad, go stop him, Kirby. While it is minimal, I do like small details, like Meta Knight seeming like a bad guy, but actually he's trying to stop his evil mirror self from letting loose Dark Mind. Also, while most of the boss fights are fine enough and standard Kirby fare, Dark Mind is long!
It's like a Final Fantasy game in here.
Of course, the final boss has that same kind of feeling as most Kirby games, where he seems to be on average more difficult than the curve would allow. The problem here being that you can go anywhere from the start, so most of the game is the same difficulty, and then this guy is slightly harder than that because he has multiple phases.
So we're just gonna sit here and watch him transform?
But, like all Kirby games, you have to end it off by facing some slightly terrifying enemy with deep lore that makes them out to be some sort of eldritch being, because Kirby is actually a monstrosity and/or god, and if we get on his bad side, he'll eat our N64. I do not have an N64, and am not willing to find out what he'll do next.
There may not have been much to that mirror, but I found it pretty amazing. And it's probably one of those guilty pleasure games. I understand that it'll never be the most popular Kirby game, but between my nostalgia and the fact that they haven't really replicated that idea since, it's always going to hold up more than some of the other Kirby games in my opinion. But in the meantime, I've got some catching up to do. Mirror Statch was just telling me about their version of the game.
So the exact opposite of Kirby is Morgan Freeman. Huh.